Oh, here we are. Hey everyone, I'm just waiting for Todd and Obaid to join me on stage, so please just give me a moment. They should be here shortly. Otherwise, you've just got me. Oh, hi, Rob. Oh, got some company. Put your messages on the chat. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to ask questions throughout. And we will also be inviting people up to raise their hand and ask questions live on video, which is exciting. Let me just see where those guys are. Oh, here we go. Hey, Todd.
Our fault.
Yo, we thought you were gonna like kind of usher us in, and so we were sitting back there like, so what's up?
Oh no, I've just been talking
We're-
into the abyss. Happy that people have been writing hi on the chat, so I was queue only.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
I was getting really nervous then that you weren't going to come on.
Todd was just saying it's kind of weird that we can't see anyone. I was like, yeah, Anyways, and we started talking about like other things, and then JB pops up. He's like, "Hey guys, come on, it's the stage."
Time
and
to
I'm
go.
like, "Oh,
Jamie's
okay.
told you off. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for joining. So yeah, hey everyone. Sorry for that short delay. Welcome to the Loop, episode number 2. Really excited to have Todd and Obaid with me today. We're going to be talking about our easy mode framework, so how we've basically transformed our whole content strategy at Cognism, our DG content strategy. So Todd and Obaid, I don't know if you just want to quickly introduce yourselves, but I feel like everyone's going to know who you are anyway. But please do a short intro and then we'll crack on.
Be my guest, Obaid. Lead us off.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name's Obaid Durrani. I'm the head of content at Hockey Stack and co-founder of Easy Mode.
And
Todd.
I am Todd Clouser. I do marketing at Lavender and also co-founder at Easy Mode.
Amazing. Cool. So let's begin. I am going to share some slides. Just give me a second. I'm going to share some slides today just because I think it will be easier to share like tactical insights just if we're if we've actually got it in front of us. Another little issue here in that I don't have them up yet. 1 second. Give me a second, guys. Just trying to find that.
All good. Let's get this comment section going. Where's everybody joining us from today?
Oh, thank you.
I'm joining you from my backyard in St. Pete, Florida.
Nice. Belgium, Denver, Serbia, the Netherlands. Wow, that's awesome.
Cool. Can everyone see the slides? I hope you can.
Yep.
Cool. Amazing. Great. So let's begin. So just to set the scene, I guess, from my perspective in why we needed easy mode at Cognism. So for us, we had recognized that we needed like content support within the DG team, and we knew that we wanted content heads like sat within that team. But to be honest, we were kind of struggling to scale it. And what we found was we had these like content execs working with the DG managers, but essentially what we were producing was like a blog post every week. We'd have like a rough theme for the quarter that we would try and stick to, but there was really like no direction, and we weren't really telling like a cohesive story. So we kind of knew that we needed to do more, but it was really difficult to know where to go with it. So then we got introduced to Todd and Obaid, which was amazing. And we started to delve into this easy mode framework. So we're going to give you some insights into how we've rolled that out. So we'll start with exactly what it is, what it looks like, and some real tactical examples of how we've implemented it. So I am going to give the floor to you guys just to talk through what easy mode is and what the framework kind of looks like. So I don't know who wants to take that first, but
Totally.
Kick it off a bit.
Yeah. So easy mode is essentially, it's a way to put together a lot of the advice that we get as marketers, but the advice is sort of difficult to act on without a plan, right? Build a media company, use in-house creators, stand out from the crowd, all that stuff. So what Todd and I wanted to do was to create an actual framework or a plan or a process that marketing teams could follow that could help them accomplish all these things. And so once it's an 8-part framework, and you can think of it as a new way to go about your content strategy. It helps you build a repeatable engine, all those things. And so the 8 parts of the framework, which we'll dive into in detail shortly after this, are 1, getting a creator manager. That's going to be sort of like your coach, the person that's going to learn this framework the best, and they'll be helping everyone, current employees and future employees, implement the framework and learn it and all that stuff. 2 is, we called it the mindset part of this framework. It goes over a concept called idea-driven content. 3 is the purpose part of this framework, which goes over the content journey, or, quote unquote, the journey your content will go on. The 4th part of this framework is strategy. We break that down into something called the 5 pillars and a process called the realm of relevancy. The 5th part of this framework is, we start moving into ideation, and the ideation part is essentially a 4-step thought process that we need to go to. I can't see the page anymore, but I think the 5th or the 6th part is creation. There we go. It's creation. There's a few. And so this part, you guys are all awesome marketers. You're all good content creators. So the creation part of this framework is not like, hey, here's how you go about creating content. It's more so a few more concepts that you can keep in mind the next time you go into content creation that should really help you improve the quality of the content you're creating. And the 7th part of this framework is distribution, where we go over the channels, your cadence, and your production process. And then the final part of this is iteration, right? So where we analyze the content, we see how things are performing, and then we tweak the content strategy so we can sort of rinse and repeat. Todd, you want to add anything to that part, sir?
I mean, you just kind of went through the whole thing. So, yeah, I think we'll dive in more detail as we go. But I think that's it in a nutshell.
Cool. So we can go to the next slide. And then what we'll do now is we'll talk about each one of these parts in a little bit more detail so everyone can get a better understanding of what all that means. So the first part is, again, the idea-driven content part. And the reason we call this mindset is because this is kind of like a, let's learn it, let's understand it, let's look at content this way, and then we kind of don't need to come back to this section. Whereas the later sections of this framework, that's kind of like the repeatable process. This is kind of just the section where you learn. And what this is it's our definition for what it means to make good content, right? It's something that you hear all the time. Just make good content, but it's like, what does that even mean? How do you define what that means? On one hand, Fran could put out a text post on LinkedIn and it could be good content. And on the other hand, Todd could release a funny marketing skit tomorrow, and then that's good content. So it's like, how do you distinguish between these different levels of resources and time involved and stuff? So what we did is we analyzed hundreds and hundreds of high performing content assets. We found the common variables within these content assets, and then we divided them into 3 groups or buckets, and we called them types. So there's 3 types of good content. Type 1 is insightful substance. What that means is, for your content to be any level of good, at the very least, it needs to be built on insightful substance. So unique perspectives, unique advice, tactical things speaking from experience, things that make people wonder, ponder. It gives them a new approach to something, these types of things, right? You could consider that insightful substance in a B2B SaaS context. From there, we move to type 2. Type 2 is insightful substance delivered through an interesting format. So here you could think of things like animated explainer videos. There's lots of brands like Kurzgesagt and Giant Ant and Ordinary Folk. They make awesome animated explainer videos on great, interesting topics. If you're familiar with Winter or Pape Laya, he makes a series called Do You Even Resonate, where he uses data and insights from tests that he runs through his product, and then he presents it to you in this video series. So that is another good example of type 2 insightful substance in an interesting format. And then the last one, type 3, is insightful substance delivered through an interesting format and built on an entertaining concept. So this is where things like, ClickUp's commercials come in. They make the commercials where they have a group of cavemen showing you how they used ClickUp way back in the day. This is where things like Gong's Super Bowl commercial comes into the picture. So that's how we look at it. And really the purpose of understanding this is starting to look at content the way, for an example, a musician would listen to music, right? Normal people, when they hear songs, they kind of just hear the instruments, they hear the words. But if you've ever sat with a musician or an artist or something and listen to music, they kind of hear all these bells and whistles in the background, and they hear things that you didn't even know were there. So understanding this mindset is the equivalent to that for a content creator. After this event, you can go and consider all of your favorite content assets from your favorite brands, whether it be Cognism stuff or, Lavender stuff or Ahrefs stuff, whatever it may be. Think of a content asset, and I can almost guarantee that you'll be able to place it in one of these buckets. So understanding this really helps you when it comes to creating content and stuff. So that's it for that part. Todd, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, real quick. I want to give another example of the interesting format part of this, because I think this is where a lot of people tend to get hung up, because interesting can be subjective. So when we talk about interesting format, it's something that's, to me, it's like the format makes the content itself more interesting. So if you think about, there's two examples I like to use all the time. If you think about sports shows, if you think about ESPN, a lot of these shows, or they all report on the exact same content, but there's shows like Pardon the Interruption, Around the Horn. They all have these very different concepts in how they present that information. Another really good example is game shows. So there's a million game shows out there that are just trivia, but Jeopardy and Family Feud, these are all different formats in which they present the data that makes it more interesting. So when you think about interesting format, don't think about how can I in post-production make this more watchable and get people through it, kind of what we think about with TikTok style videos, making them quick. Think about how you can present the information itself in a more interesting format. So just wanted to throw that in there, because interesting format typically brings up a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think that's where we were quite overwhelmed with that when we started rolling this out at Cognism. It was very much we realized we had a lot of type 1, because that's insightful substance, like most companies do. But then when it got to the type 2 and type 3 stuff, I think we were just a bit nervous. But actually, when you break it down, and as you said, interesting can mean different things to different people. But it's almost if you do it off the bat, instead of going back and trying to repurpose it as an infographic or something such as that, it's definitely much easier. we do actually have 3 examples to share of our Cognism type 1, type 2, and type 3. So hopefully this will help kind of like set the scene and explain what we mean. So I'll just go to the next slide. So this is a type 1. So this is going to be a test for me now. So this is a type 1 because it's insightful substance. So this is our one of our organic posts. So we've got a really like value-led, ungated post, kind of like going in and just like providing like lots of value and an explanation, like via a visual here. So like that's a type 1 content which we put out a lot. And then a type 2, which is a video, and I do believe Jamie, who's in.
I've done this as well when I was an SDR. I'm like, oh, I have 60 emails to send out. Let me just rush through it. How do you make sure that you're being more thoughtful? Oh yeah, we all have.
The thing about me is I'm a perfectionist, especially when it comes to, you know, making mistakes and stuff like that. I don't really take it lightly. I immediately go to my performance and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at my job. I made this mistake, I made that mistake, whatever. And then my manager will come to me and be like, look, it happens, you know, you made a mistake, whatever, you move on from it.
Madison, walk us through your SDR confession.
Well, I'm going to have a lot of people look at me and say, Madison, what were you thinking?
So just to give you some sort of insight into that, I probably should have explained what it was before we played it. So this
Hold on, Fran, real quick, Fran. I'm curious. Sorry to cut you off. I'm curious. I dropped a question in the chat. I'm curious if anybody watching that could spot the interesting format, like why that is interesting.
I love that.
If Fran recalls, we played this game early on. When we were going through this, we just showed a bunch of content, and we tested you guys to see if you could figure out type 1, type 2, and type 3. So I'm curious, like we can move on if nobody answers, but I just thought it would be fun to see.
What about this game? And it's good because I don't have to answer it this time. So it is type 2. And let's have a look. Podcast, type 2, talk show, formatted with subs.
Okay, so you wanna. This is fun because this is the exact situation that we had with the original discussion. So
another thing that I think would help is when we're talking about formats, right? Like we're talking about the format of the content itself. For example, we can say, let's make video content, but there's so many subsets of that, right? So when it comes to video content, it's like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a normal video of like me just sitting there talking to the camera, or are we talking about a sketch comedy skit? Or are we talking about a commercial? Or are we talking about a meme, right? So those are all different formats, and those are all different forms of video. So I was about to give away the answer. I'm going to stop now.
You can give it away.
Yeah. So the whole interesting format of the Confessions of an SDR is, the concept of the show is Morgan Ingram gets different SDRs on the show, and they make a confession live, one of the biggest like slip ups they've ever done. And then Morgan gives them feedback on how they could improve that, and they could, do it moving forward. So you getting to hear the confession from the SDR and then seeing that Morgan is giving them feedback live on the call, that's the format or the concept of the show. Whereas alternatively, it could have just been Morgan, knowing beforehand that, okay, we got a fan submission and they said this, and then Morgan just gets on the video and he's like, hey, okay, so if you've ever done this before, here's how you can prevent this mistake moving forward. Just like, dozens and dozens of other talking head videos. But we include the SDR in the video. They share their confession, and so you get to see all of this stuff live. I may have butchered that, so you guys could go ahead and give your own interpretation of that.
No, that's exactly it. Exactly what we've tried to do. I think previously, just for context, we'd have maybe Morgan saying, these are the biggest mistakes that you can make as an SDR. And it would be him talking to camera, or it would be a text post. These are the biggest mistakes SDRs make. But making it interesting is getting the SDR on, sharing the confession. It's making it more human. We try and add that like blooper sort of style to it, just because again, like just to kind of make that content more engaging. And also like SDRs will relate to other SDRs. So again, it's kind of like really connecting with like the audience and the ICP. So it's been super successful as a type 2, which is cool. I don't know if you want to add anything, Todd. Otherwise, I'll share our type 3.
Yeah, you guys nailed it. I saw a couple people put like podcast in there. So podcast, just that kind of goes to the same thing that Obaid was saying. Like podcast is kind of a generic term. Like it could be type 1, it could be type 2. It depends on like the actual format of the podcast. So don't think about like
the concept too.
Yeah, exactly. So don't think about the delivery like mechanism, but think about like the concept and the format behind the actual delivery,
which we'll dive much deeper into all these things: format, concept, delivery, all of these things.
Great. Okay. There are a few questions, but I do think like talking about like the ratio of this type of content versus product content, and probably there will be questions like how much type 1 to type 2 to type 3. But maybe if we haven't answered them, we can answer those at the end. But I think you guys will answer them naturally as we go through. So just conscious of time. So I'll play the type 3. Again, let's play the game. Please do write in the comment box, in the messages, just like why you think it's a type 3. So this is one of our marketing type 3 content examples. So Jamie, do you want to play?
Why the fuck is middle finger emoji at competitor.com making its way through to my sales team as an MQL?
Have you ever been questioned by sales about the quality of your leads? That's because they don't know how to hit goal, and you do. Ignore them. Let them complain. It's not your job to close deals. It's your job to provide phone numbers and email addresses. Do you get to spend 3 nights at the Four Seasons if they close your MQL? I didn't think so. I've been running marketing teams for 31 years, and I've developed a system for making even the most incompetent marketing teams appear effective. It's called lead gen. And in this course, I'm going to show you how to get promoted as a marketer without ever driving any business results for your company. You will learn how to drive leads, regardless of their intent or if they ever close.
You send us the same leads every week because they opened your email like it's some prize. I already told you, we called them several times and they're in a contract.
You'll learn how to deny responsibility when questioned in front of leadership. The skills taught in this class could very well save your job. I'm the worst marketer in the world, and this is Masterclass.
Okay guys, so what do we think? I know sales are breathing down our necks at the moment. I really think this guy can help us out with lead volume. So what do you think? Should we give him a go?
It's not my problem if sales can close. Let's do it.
But it was his problem. 2 months after implementing what he learned in this masterclass, Liam was brought in front of the executive leadership team to explain why none of marketing's leads were closing. After trying to place the blame on sales' ability to close, Liam was fired and is now suing the worst marketer in the world for false advertising. Janie became the first marketer in company history to be put on a PIP for recommending the plan, and has now been moved into an SDR role where he has to call every marketing lead from the past 6 months. He is yet to set a meeting.
Oh God, it still makes me laugh every
That's
time.
so hilarious.
This is why we've got Jamie in the back end, because he's still on PIP. We couldn't possibly bring him out on stage.
Jamie's still on that.
So I don't know if anyone
That's
wants
hilarious.
to write why they think it's a type 3. It's probably obvious, to be fair, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think the important thing here is the entertainment factor is obvious, right? Like when people think about type 3, like the entertainment is at the forefront, and that's why people automatically say type 3. But like if you look deep enough, it should still have some sort of insightful substance, relevance to your audience. And I think that's why, so like when you're creating entertaining content, like if you don't have that insightful substance baked down deep into it, that's where you start getting into like vanity content and random acts of content and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's the major takeaway with type 3 is like, don't stray too far from the insightful substance, because once you kind of cross that threshold, now you're being funny to be funny for the sake of being funny on the internet. And that's when vanity come in.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think for us, it was important. So that for us, this type 3 like clearly links back to our B2B marketing doesn't have to be boring campaign, and also kind of like layers in the whole shift from like lead gen to demand gen. But I can see how, like, I remember when we were brainstorming ideas for type 3, you can see how you can just go way off the wall and you're kind of so far away from what your company does. It's entertaining, but then you can kind of never bring it back to the actual company itself. So yeah, that's a very good piece of advice. And we will share the clip post-event if that's what the people want. Cool. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So this is just an introduction to the framework, part 2. So it's kind of like very tactically like how it looks and how you should be thinking about it. So again, I'll hand over to you guys to run through that.
Yeah, totally. I think we may have missed one part though. I think we didn't go over the journey, content journey. I think if you go a few slides back, we missed here. So we just went over the mindset part of the framework, which was part 1, idea-driven content. The second part of this framework is the content journey, which essentially just helps you establish the purpose of your content. Lots of marketers think, the purpose of their content is to get brand awareness or to generate more leads and things like that. But these are all byproducts of accomplishing your actual purposes, which Todd and I define as your top-down narrative, your middle out. So the top-down narrative is the content that is meant to reach the people in your target organizations that can drive company-wide strategic change, right? Your middle out implementation, this is content that is meant to reach the people in your target orgs that are going to tactically implement that change. And then the bottom up evangelism is content meant to reach end users in your target org that are going to drive admiration and awareness from the ground up. And so really quickly, if we just look a bit more into that, your top-down narrative. So it's like, okay, these are the people that are going to drive company-wide change in our target orgs. All right. Who are they for our company? You make a list of those people. So, CEO, global head of revenue, CMO, whoever it may be. You make a list of these people. You can now reach out to these people, network with them, get 15 minutes of their day to jump on a Zoom call, learn about their challenges, their goals, their interest, things like that. You do the same thing with the middle out segment of this audience, right? The middle out people. It's like, okay, these are the people that are going to tactically implement that change in these target orgs. All right, who are they in relation to our company, our product? You make a list of those people. SDR manager, right? Head of content, these types of people that are going to be tactically implementing these things. Again, you network with them, you set up 15-minute calls with them, you add them on LinkedIn, you have conversations with them, learn about their interests, their challenges, their obstacles, their goals, things like that. And then same thing with the bottom up evangelism, right? Okay, these are people, or these are the end users in our target orgs that are going to drive awareness from the ground up. So who are these people? Who are the end users? Make a list of those people, do the same thing. Now, where it gets really cool is like, okay, well, what if our product has multiple use cases? Marketing department can use our product and customer success can use it. Well, groups for all of those use cases, right? And so how this helps you is you now have real information about the real people that make up your audience, right? A lot of people say know your audience, but you know, this helps you figure out who your audience actually consists of. And we think it's a better approach to learning more about your audience and personas than, you know, creating buyer personas, right? Because it's hard to sum up, or, you know, right, it's hard to sum up thousands and thousands of different personalities into 4 or 5 predetermined personas. And this is a good way to learn about the actual people that will be impacting your sales cycles, that will be becoming users and things like that. Todd, sir, what do you have?
You covered it, man. Yeah, it's about the way this came up was we talked to a whole bunch of people, and specifically back when we were talking to people about creating video content and entertaining content. And one of the first questions we always asked was like, what's the purpose? Like, why do you want to do this? And people always came back with, I want to increase brand awareness or increase inbound demo requests. And those things aren't a purpose. And that's why we call this like the purpose part of the framework, because if you tell me those, like I can't give you like good feedback on how to help you achieve that. So that's why we've kind of broken down these 3 purposes. So like if you look at your content at an individual content level, any one of your pieces of content should fit into one of these buckets, and you can say that's the purpose of it. And it also helps you measure how successful it is, because you know what it's trying to achieve.
Cool. Should we move on to part 2 of the framework? If I can skip back. Hang on.
Can you hear me fine now though? Am I still going in and out?
Yeah, you're fine now. You were just cutting in and out a bit. Cool. If you keep doing it, I'll just interrupt you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Hang on. No, it's fine. Are we here? We are here. Okay. So this is introduction to the part 2 of the framework. So I'll let you guys chat through that. Right.
So mindset, you kind of go over that, you spend some time with that, you consider different content assets and see where they fit in. Just get a good understanding of the whole type 1, type 2, type 3 thing. From there, you segment your audience in a way, and you define the purposes of your content strategy. Now we're going to move into the rest of the framework, and this is going to be everything that you see here. This is going to kind of be like, okay, you know, we sort this out 3 months, then we attack it, then we come back to the beginning, we sort of look at it. So this is the part of the framework that's going to you know, change over time and stuff. So first part, or you know, the first thing that we'll get into is strategy. And just like how we mentioned earlier that you guys are all good marketers, you're all good content creators, you don't need us to tell you how to create content. It's the same part with the strategy part, right? So you're already going to have a business strategy, you're already going to have a marketing strategy in place. And so we're not here to like replace that, right? So the way we break down our strategy part of this framework is we go into something called the 5 prerequisites of ideation, which are essentially the 5 things that you have to have a really deep understanding of before you can move to ideation. And then something else called the realm of relevancy, which is a way for you to map out your strategic narrative and turn it into content topics. And the reason for that is we felt that a lot of companies that do get these strategic narratives built, they kind of just sit in a slide deck. And maybe they'll have like a CEO or something that posts about it on LinkedIn every once in a while, but that narrative doesn't really make its way into the everyday content that they put out. They'll still be blogging about, every keyword under the sun remotely related to their product and things like that. So this narrative, the realm of relevancy process really helps with that. Then we move into ideation.
Real quick. Let me just, because I don't think you mentioned them. So the 5 prerequisites of ideation.
Well, I think we're going to get into all that next, right? I think this was just like an overview of the rest of the framework. I think are there slides for like diving into each one of these parts or no?
Yeah, we have like the pre.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So the rest of this stuff, like we'll dive into in detail. So I think we can just move to the next slide.
Perfect. Here we go.
Todd, you want to do this since you were just talking about it or about to start talking?
Yeah,
about
no,
it?
I mean, so the 5 prerequisites are basically, the reason that we have these is because when you're creating content, there's a couple things that you really need to understand at a deep level if you're going to actually resonate. Your content's going to resonate with the audience. So number one is your product. So a lot of people, especially when they're creating like non-product marketing related content, so like thought leadership and all this stuff that we're talking about with type 1, 2, and 3, they don't link it back to their product. So Obaid likes to talk a lot about association. Like you can educate your audience all you want, but if you don't in some way, shape, or form link back to your product in some way, like it may or may not help you at the end of the day. So like think about like if you had to do a demo of your product, like could you do it? Do you understand it well enough so that when you create content around it, it makes total sense? Number 2 is your strategic narrative, which we're going to go over in the realm of relevancy. But coming back to product, like nowadays everybody's product, like everyone steals features from everybody else. So like what are you differentiating on? Do you understand your narrative? Like what do you stand for? Again, like if you have to know that very deep in order for your content to be different from everything else that your competitors are making. Third one is your audience. So again, like, do you know the nuance of how your audience acts, does their day-to-day job, all those things? Because again, if I'm creating content without a deep understanding of my audience, and I know that's a generic term, it's not going to resonate on a deep level. So like, as an example, I'm a marketer. I can create content for SDRs all day long, but at the end of the day, an SDR creating content for SDRs is going to be way more impactful because they understand the day-to-day of an SDR. So like it helps to bring people in like that. But if you don't have the ability to do that, like you really have to understand the nuance. So number 4 is business objective. So again, this is where like random acts of marketing come into play. In so many organizations, it's literally just, okay, let's like think of an idea and create content around it without any understanding of like, what are we trying to achieve in creating this content? So like, again, this kind of comes back to like the purposes a little bit. So like you have to understand what you're trying to achieve. So like if I say, I have a revenue goal of X at the end of the year, how am I going to get there? Like, what's the objective? Breaking that down from a content level. How am I going to achieve that objective? And the last one is content format. So understanding that in order to best achieve those goals, those objectives, what are the best content formats that are going to get me there? So as an example, if coming back to the purpose thing, like if I'm trying to change strategic mindset in my end users, my customers, like strategic decision makers, I'm probably not going to use type 3 entertaining content to do that, because it's not going to be the most effective thing in order to achieve that purpose. So I'm probably going to go with type 1 insightful substance. So an understanding of all of these things will help your content resonate more and help you achieve those end goals. Hop in there, Obaid.
Yeah. One last little side note is on number 3, audience. Audience means two different things, right? There's the audience that your business is focused on, your ICP, your TAM. There's your audience there. And then as content creators, there's also like your audience, like, so the people that you're actually speaking to when you post on LinkedIn, for example, right? So one thing that I've noticed is a lot of marketers, their audience doesn't really reflect their audience, right? If you know they might just be connected with like other marketers on LinkedIn. They're mostly just connected with other marketers, but let's say that they, work for a SaaS company where they sell a product to AEs, and it's like they have 0 AEs that they're connected with. They have 0 AEs that they're networking with. No AEs are seeing their content when they post it. So we also have to make sure that our audience, our personal audience, reflects our business's audience if we're going to be creating content and trying to build demand in these things on these social channels. The last thing is content formats, different content formats. There's a lot that goes into that. We mentioned it a little bit earlier, how there's, all these different kinds of videos, for example. You can't get away with just saying textual content, right? Like if I go to Todd tomorrow and I'm like, hey man, let's make some text content, he's going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, do you mean like blog posts? Do you mean, a LinkedIn post? Do you mean let's write an ebook? Like, what do you mean text content? So in the same sense, like we won't be able to get away with saying video content for too long, because there's so many different ways that you can look at just video content. So as a marketer, as a creator, along with having a really deep understanding of your product, your narrative, your audience, and your objectives, you should also have a very deep understanding of different content formats, right? At the end of the day, if as a team, you only know how to build ebooks and email newsletters and blog posts, then unfortunately, you're only going to be able to produce ebooks and email newsletters and blog posts, right? So having a good understanding of a bunch of different content formats is really good. Moving on from that, now we get to the realm of relevancy. So this is really cool. We think it's really helpful as well. I mean, all this stuff is, but we really like this part. So this is going to be a little bit difficult to explain, I guess, but the way that we do it.
Sorry to interrupt. We do have, if you want to give an overview of it, and then we do have an example of the one we wrote for.
Oh, yes.
It might be easier, but do give an overview.
Totally. Yeah, totally. So your strategic narrative, it goes at the top, right? And as I'm sure all you guys are aware, all y'all are aware, your strategic narrative could be like the story of the old game versus the new game, right? It's this big change that you're trying to see implemented in your industry. It's something that's already occurring. It's not necessarily something that you're trying to like inflict, right? So you have your narrative at the top, and you could just enter it there as a statement, right? Your strategic narrative. In Cognism's case, their narrative is that B2B buying behaviors has changed. And we'll look into the actual, the notes of the realm, but just to sort of like explain this. So your narrative, B2B buying behavior has changed, it'll go at the top. But let's say like if I run into you at like the supermarket or something and we're just talking about B2B and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, so B2B buying behavior has changed. You know, you'd probably be like, cool, right? But that statement alone does not give you a full understanding of all the different things that I'm trying to convey, right? So if you're interested in this conversation, you'd probably be like, okay, like explain or something like that. So from there, it's like, how does this conversation unfold? How do you explain this conversation? There's so many different ways that you can take it in. So how do you know which direction to take it in? So for that, below your strategic narrative, we have your unique point of views. And these are sort of statements that expand upon your narrative, right? Like, what is it? What does it mean? How do you adapt to it? How do you adopt this thing? Can you provide examples of it? Things like that, right? So these are all going to be covered in your unique point of views. Now, if I say, you know, B2B buying behavior has changed and Todd is like, okay, explain or elaborate. And I'm like, oh, you know, one of my unique point of views could be, well, we need to stop building fantasy funnels, right? And that in and of its own might be an intriguing statement. But again, that is still not enough for me to convey my message. So then I'd break it down even further, and we call those sparks. So just like the way your unique point of views are a way to break down your narrative to explain it better, your sparks are how you break down each point of view to establish and explain that better. So your narrative breaks down into X amount of point of views, depending on how far you are on sort of like this journey of fleshing out your narrative. If it's something in the beginning, if you're just in the beginning of it, you may have just 2 or 3 unique point of views, and that's cool. You don't need to have 7 point of views right from the get-go, right? So your strategic narrative breaks down into these X amount of POVs. Each POV breaks down into however many sparks. And then we weren't able to fit it here on this slide, but sparks breaks down into subject matter, which are the actual nitty-gritty details of all of these things. And then once you put all this content out, you'll receive audience signals. And audience signals are the questions people have, the concerns they have, you know, the feedback they have, the criticism they have. These are all going to inform each one of these things. Now, the cool part about this is once you build out this realm, once you've actually built it out, you'll see that every single one of these things are individual topics. And if we can go to the next slide, I think that's where there will be a so here is a sort of like rundown of Cognism's narrative, right? So we have the narrative at the top. B2B buying behavior has changed. Now there's different ways that I can go about explaining this statement depending on who I'm talking to, and those are my POVs. So here we have 3 POVs. POV 1 is marketers need to be more than just sales support. Okay, awesome. POV 2 is stop building fantasy funnels. Be very specific about what this means in practice. POV 3 is marketing-led growth only works if it's memorable. Now, let's say that you're a CEO. I run into you into an elevator. We, for some reason, start talking about B2B SaaS and buying behaviors. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's changed. And you're like, well, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, for one, marketers need to be more than just sales support. You're not going to be like, got it. See you later, buddy. Right. So like, I can't convey all the different things I'm trying to say in that statement alone. So now I have these sparks. So to further break down the point of view or the stance or the point that marketers need to be more than just sales support, I can be like, well, marketers need to find the right places to create demand, or marketers need the skill to market to out of market buyers, or I could say marketers can't rely on outdated tactics. In the same sense, if we're talking about the second point of view, stop building fantasy funnels, to establish what that means and break that down, I can say, hey, marketing relying on assumed intent doesn't work. I can talk about how declared intent trumps assumed intent, and I can dive deep into how buyer journeys are not linear. And the last point of view, marketing-led growth only works if it's memorable. What we mean by that is buyers need to think of you when they move in market. Admiration is more important than awareness, and finding the right balance in your content and distribution. Now, this slide, it only shows you the narrative, the point of views, and the sparks. And so if we go to the next slide, that will show you the subject matter under each one of these sparks.
I don't think we actually have, 1 second, we don't have that, but we can share that afterwards. Yeah. Kind of like all the subject matter. I think it's because, again, like the subject matter are the topics that's like spin off these sparks, but we had so many. It was really hard to fit into one slide, but we can, of course.
Yeah, totally. So what we did with Cognism is, because they create content for a sales audience and a marketing audience, we have our narrative of B2B buying behavior has changed. We created 3 POVs that establish and flesh out the narrative of B2B buying behavior having changed in a way that resonates with their marketing audience. And then we also created 3 separate POVs and the subsequent sparks and subject matter and all of that in a way that would resonate with their sales audience. So their narrative of B2B buying behavior having changed is broken down into 6 unique point of views. Each one of those 6 point of views are broken down into 3 sparks, and every single one of those sparks, so I guess like 18 sparks or something like that, they're all broken down into 5 to 10, nitty-gritty details that we call subject matter. So when we look at this slide, we literally see a bullet point list of 60, 70 topics. And these are all things that Cognism can now build content around moving forward. Another way this helps you is once you flesh all of this out, it can also pinpoint to you where you've been spending a lot of time. Like, for example, I remember when we fleshed this out and we kind of like saw this stuff, we were like, okay, so the B2B buying or the B2B boring marketing boring thing, like it actually turned out to be like a spark under one of our unique point of views. And we saw like, okay, there's all this other content or all these other topics that we can be creating content around. And yeah, I'm going to stop rambling at this point. Todd, what do you have?
Yeah, I think the only thing that you didn't mention there is, so you create all these, you create the POVs, you create all the sparks and the subject matter that goes under that. But this almost becomes like an infinite loop of content that you can come up with, because the one thing that wasn't mentioned here was all of that subject matter you get audience feedback from. So things like questions, objections, people disagreeing with you, whatever. It allows you to dive deeper into those things. So like you can continuously add more subject matter and flesh these things out based on the audience feedback. So it's essentially like think about the realm of relevancy as a way to give guide rails or guardrails to your content. So everybody creating content within your organization leads back up to your same strategic narrative. So there's no longer these random acts of content happening.
Yeah, agreed. I think that sums it up very nicely. Great. Okay. So for the next, we have 5 minutes left, but we have extended this a little bit for questions. So what I'm going to do is just run through how we've implemented this at Cognism, and I'll get input from you guys as well. And then we'll like save like 10 minutes or so, or run 10 minutes over just for questions if anyone has any. Unless you guys have anything more to add on this part. We're good.
Nope.
No? Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. It was a really good. Okay, so I guess at Cognism, we were kind of like at the stage where we had this realm of relevancy down. We understood the framework, and then we've spent this quarter going through like actually implementing it, which has been great for us, and there's been lots of learnings like along the way. So we've done the planning, so the narrative, we've built out the points of view for both personas, and we are actually working on it for a third persona right now. And then it was all about the activation. So we talk a lot about our media machine, which consists of our podcasts, live events, blogs, newsletters, paid social, and really we want to be fueling like our full media machine with this narrative. So we actually started with one point of view. So we picked POV 1 for marketing, and it's like the marketers are more than just sales support. So we actually, as Todd and Obaid were saying, we actually just put that out on the channels. We reworked some of our existing live events. So now we have this event, The Loop, which was previously Demandism, tweaked the newsletter as well, and just really went out there with this strong point of view. And we've been gathering feedback on like how that's been resonating. So looking at specific questions we've received on points of view, we've been doubling down on the content that's worked, and also like any content that doesn't resonate, we've been kind of like, the idea is that you move on from that. Luckily our POV 1 has resonated pretty well, so we're basically rolling that out on our channels and measuring that success. So I can just show you guys some examples of that. So examples of our POV content that we've rolled out for this quarter. So all of this is around our POV marketing and more than just sales support. So we've got this Loop podcast, we've got this live event. So episode 1, Alice and Liam really deep dived into this POV, which feeds back up into our narrative. We've ran it on organic social and our own profiles as well, our own like subject matter experts, the subject matter experts within the marketing team. So like Alice, like Liam have been like putting this out there on their profiles to like stress test that message. And then really, we have our key pillar blog here, which is how marketing can support sales. And then we have like subject matter spinning off that. So how to do brand marketing right, how to use TikTok for like B2B marketing. So we've really kind of like spread the POV like far and wide. And then in measuring this, sorry, I'm skipping through quite quickly because I want to give us time to answer some questions. Just let me look at that. Yeah. So how are we measuring like the success of this framework that we've rolled out? So we're kind of in a position where we've rolled out POV 1 this quarter, and we've just finished our quarterly report, which looks very different to when we used to do quarterly reports when we were doing lead gen. And we look at things like blog views, video views, page depth. We're looking at like listen rate on the podcast and consumption rate. We're also looking at increases in target audience percentage. So by that, we mean, is this new POV like attracting more of our core audience like into our media machine? So are our newsletter subscribers going up? Are we getting more podcast listeners? Are more of our target audience like attending our live events? So we look at that really closely in comparison to previous quarters. And then, as we always say, like 2 really important things which often get overlooked are self-reported attribution. So where did you hear about us? So, you know, we might have somebody saying, saw like the worst marketer in the world video that you guys did, or read your marketing and more than just sales support blog. So that's like great insights there. And then obviously like the qualitative feedback, so like the dark social element of it. So again, like feedback via email or on chat or anywhere, really anywhere where our audience is kind of like giving us, like actively giving us feedback. So I've rushed through that a little bit, but we will share the slides and we can take some questions. But I don't know, Todd and Obaid, if you want to add anything to that. I just wanted to kind of showcase how we'd rolled it out. Ooh. No, all good.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm trying to reply back to this SEO question on the
cool.
chat. So Todd, you can take it.
No, I think you nailed it, Fran.
Thank you. Okay, great. We do actually, I am going to stop sharing my screen. We do actually have time for questions. Well, it's bang on the hour, but if anyone wants to stick around, we're happy. You guys happy to stick around and answer a couple of questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally. I do have one last like sort of parting advice before everyone heads out. So just real quick, if you kind of go back through this framework, in the beginning there was the mindset stuff, type 1, type 2, type 3, gives you a good idea about how to, create different types of content. Your content journey, top down, middle out, bottom up, helps you segment your audience, helps you understand who that audience is, and it also gives you a purpose behind your content, right? Like these are the people that are going to tactically implement it. These are the people that are going to drive change, this type of stuff. And then the third part of this framework was building out that realm of relevancy. So as someone mentioned earlier in the chat, that's like the way that we built out Cognism's realm of relevancy. They have like over 100 topics, right? So now the cool thing about this is we're keeping in mind formats, audience segments, and different types of content. So if I take any one of those topics, for example, let's see if I can remember. One of them was marketers need to know how to market to out-of-market buyers, right? So I can take this topic and then I can go and think of, all right, if I'm creating something on this topic, which part of my content journey does it map to? Is this going to be for the top down audience? Is this going to be for the middle out audience? Is this going to be for the bottom up audience? I can also then ask myself, how do I want to build this content? Is this going to be type 1 content, type 2 content, or type 3 content? Is this going to be something that's just straightforward, insightful substance? Or is this going to be something to where I'm going to try to explain it through an entertaining concept? Or you can do all of that, right? And that's really the purpose of this stuff. You could take every single one of these topics and then you can create it in a way that resonates with different parts of that like audience you've segmented. And instead of repurposing, trying to turn a blog post into an episode or something, you can create type 1 content out of that topic. You can also create type 2 and type 3 content out of that topic. So not only does this give you a bunch of topics and helps you sort of, define your audience, it can also help you when it comes to just having content to put out there, ideating content, like what are we going to create content around? It helps you with all of those things too. So if there's like a practical takeaway, one takeaway that you guys can take from this, it would just be that, right? Like build out that realm, segment your audience. Now you have all these content topics that you can start creating content around for different parts of that audience. And when it comes to repurposing, you can turn it into these different types of content as well.
And I think real quick too, one thing that we didn't mention is you build this out for your entire company, but then part of the beauty of this is it allows everybody within your company to create content in with the same guardrails that you're putting out from a brand perspective. So, one of the things that the reason we assign this creator manager at the very beginning of like the framework is because they can then teach this to other people who are going to become content creators for your team. So again, like the beauty of this is like someone may be really good at type 3 and someone else may be like a subject matter expert that just wants to do like podcast and type 1 type stuff, like talking head. Like the beauty of this is that you can bring all of that type of content into the same mix and make total sense. So creating a team of in-house creators is kind of like one of the things that I don't think we really talked about that this is super effective at doing.
Yep. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, definitely agreed. So I guess, we are running quite long, but does anyone have any burning questions before we go? I guess we have like 9 minutes left on this live. So if anybody has any questions, please do drop them in the chat.
Feel free to drop me, Todd, or Fran messages like on LinkedIn and stuff too afterwards if you want to chat about any of this. Yeah.
Cool. And then, Christina has one question. So let's just do Christina's question before we go. Oh, here we go. On the audience piece, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the nuance between this is not how it's done in our industry to this audience versus is there a better way to do this?
On the audience piece, I hear you on the echo chamber. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the nuance between this is not how it's done in our industry to this audience versus there is a better way to do this.
Usually I honestly, I don't even think that this is a it depends answer. I think there's really only one answer to this. With leaders, like justifiably, like you're always going to sort of have this like backlash or debate or questions on like, why should we start doing this? It's going to be very difficult to go to a leader who runs a system that's already working and making money and being like, hey, let's just stop doing this and like, lead gen and chasing MQLs and let's just start doing this entertaining content type stuff. That's really never going to work. So I would take a page out of Alice's book and Cognism's book and run a small contained experiment. You can start with these small contained experiments. I don't think most leaders would have problems with that, right? If you're trying to make a drastic change or a big change, it's really not going to sit well with anyone, understandably. But if you're requesting smaller budget, 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K, and then you want to go and run a smaller contained experiment built on these things, right? Narrative, product, realm of relevancy, content journey, all of these things. If you want to go and build that out, I think that's the recommended way you should go about it. You should prove that it works first on like the smaller scale. And then you can start to get more and more buy-in little by little. You can start expanding your efforts when it comes to that experimentation. And just like Cognism showed us over the past year and a half or so, that's how you'll be able to make that full transition over time. So instead of having that sort of like debate on like, no, this is the way that we've always done it, or like, hey, well, times are changing and we should try it this way now, I think you should just ask for a budget to experiment instead and try to prove your theory that way. Todd, sir.
I think the other side of that too is, so that's speaking to a paid media perspective, but the other thing that you could do is test it with your personal brand, because especially if you have self-reported attribution set up, once people start seeing like your name come through in that self-reported attribution, like that's a really good indicator that like, hey, I can do this with my own brand. Like we can amplify this through the brand. So
yeah, it's a good point.
There's an organic play there as well.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, guys. I think we could go on, but we probably should stop there. But as Obaid said, please reach out to us on LinkedIn with any of your questions. We will be sending the recording on this like tomorrow, including the slides. And yeah, any questions we haven't been able to answer, we will try and answer them via LinkedIn, or just reply to the email you get from us with the recording, and we can try and answer them there as well. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. It's been super insightful and nice chatting with you as always.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks all.
Had an awesome time. Thank you everyone for coming.